The purpose of the preachers of the Sankirtan movement must be to go on preaching without restrictions. That is the way in which Sri Prabhupada introduced the Sankirtan movement to the world. So Prabhupada ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. From Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 1, entitled The Activities of Maharaj Prabhupada, Text 12. And so just go through it yourself. And then we'll quote Natasya Kashchit Tapasa Vijayava Yoga Viryana Manishaya Manishayava Naivarta Dharmaya Paritasatova Kritam Vahantu Tanu Vridvi Bhuyat. Translation: one cannot avoid the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not by the strength of severe austerities, an exalted Vedic education, or the power of mystic yoga, philosophical prowess, or intellectual activities. Nor can one use his power of religion, his material opulence, or any other means, either by himself or with the help of others, to defy the orders of the Supreme Lord. That is not possible for any living being, from Brahma down to the ant. Okay, so we just repeat that. One cannot avoid the order
One cannot avoid the order
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
not by the strength of severe austerities,
not by the strength of severe austerities,
an exalted Vedic education,
an exalted Vedic education,
or the power of mystic yoga,
or the power of mystic yoga,
physical prowess or intellectual activities.
physical prowess or intellectual activities.
Nor can one use his power of religion,
Nor can one use his power of religion,
his material opulence,
his material opulence,
or any other means,
or any other means,
either by himself
either by himself
or with the help of others,
or with the help of others,
to defy the orders of the Supreme Lord.
to defy the orders of the Supreme Lord.
That is not possible for any living being,
That is not possible for any living being,
from Brahma down to the ant.
from Brahma down to the ant.
So Prabhupada's purport. In the Garga Upanishad, Gargamuni says to his wife, Etasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi surya chandra maso vitrito tishtata. My dear Gargi, everything is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even the sun, the moon, and the controllers and demigods like Lord Brahma and King Indra are all under his control. An ordinary human being or animal who has accepted the material body cannot go beyond the jurisdiction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's control. A material body includes senses. However, the sense activities of so-called scientists who try to be free from God's law or the laws of nature are useless. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Mama Maya Duratyaya. It is impossible to surpass the control of material nature, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is working behind it. Sometimes we are proud of our austerities, penances, and mystic yogic powers, but it is clearly stated herein that one cannot surpass the laws and directions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, either by dint of mystic power, a scientific education, or austerities and penances. It is impossible. The word Manishaya, by intelligence, is of special significance. Priyavrata might argue that Lord Brahma was requesting him to accept family life and responsibility for ruling the kingdom, although Narada Muni had advised him not to enter household life and be entangled in material affairs. Whom to accept would be a puzzle for Priyavrata because both Lord Brahma and Narada Muni are authorities. Under the circumstances, the use of the word Manishaya is very appropriate, for it indicates that since both Narada Muni and Lord Brahma are authorized to give instruction, Priyavrata should neglect neither of them, but should use his intelligence to follow the advice of both. To solve such dilemmas, Srila Rupa Goswami has given a very clear conception of intelligence. He says, Anashaya Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjata Nirbanda Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchate. Vishayan, material affairs, should be accepted without attachment, and everything should be dovetailed with the service of the Lord. That is real intelligence, Manisha. Becoming a family man or a king in a material world is not harmful if one accepts everything for Krishna service. That necessitates clear intelligence. Mayavadi philosophers say, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. This material world is false and only the absolute truth is real. However, an intelligent devotee in the line of Lord Brahma and the great sage Narada, or in other words, in the Brahma Sampradaya, does not consider this world false. That which is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be false, but using it for enjoyment is. Everything is meant to be enjoyed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, Bhoktaram Jayatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Proprietor and Enjoyer, and therefore everything should be dovetailed for his enjoyment and service. Regardless of one's circumstances, favourable or unfavourable, one should use everything to serve the Supreme Lord. That is the perfect way to use one's intelligence. Om Gyanatimarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Jnana Tasmashri Maha Tam Karoti Vachadam Dham Lagate Grimyati Patamam Vande Shikram Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. One cannot avoid the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not by the strength of severe austerities and exalted Vedic education, or the power of mystic yoga, physical prowess, or intellectual activities, nor can one use his power of religion, material opulence, or any other means, either by himself or with the help of others, to defy the orders of the Supreme Lord. That is not possible for any living being from Brahma down to the ant. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that everyone follows my path in all respects. So whatever path we choose, then that path is given by Krishna. There's nothing going on which is not under the control of Krishna. But we don't get the same result. The Mayavadis also say, Yatamat Tatapat. Whichever way you choose, it's all the same, all leads to the same goal, but that doesn't make sense because if you go to Glasgow Buchanan Street bus station and you decide you want to go to Aberdeen but you just catch any old bus, then that wouldn't be a very safe proposal. So similarly, not all paths lead to the same goal. There's nivriti and pravriti. There's things which we should accept as pravriti and things which we shouldn't accept, we should keep out of our life, which is nivriti. So if we follow the path of nivriti, or if we don't abstain from the nivritis, then we don't attain the same goal as that which is the things which we should accept. So this is also explained in the Shastra and Bhagavad Gita that the demoniac don't know what is to be done and what is to be done. Pravritti-cha, nivritti-cha. They don't know what should be accepted, they don't know what should be rejected. So therefore their mind is actually not their best friend. So the faculty of the mind is to accept and reject. And on what basis we accept and reject, that will determine what kind of reaction we get or what the result will be. If we accept and reject on the basis of I being mine, that I'm the centre of attention, that everything is meant for my enjoyment, and I only operate for that purpose, then the result will be one thing, which is generally means that we will utilise other people, other living entities, material energy for ourselves, and we won't care for the consequences, which will definitely come anyway, as according to the law of nature. Whereas if we base our accepting and rejecting on the the principles given by Srila Goswami, which is Anakurena Krishnanu Shilana Bhakti Uttama, that we accept only that which is favourable for devotional service and reject that which is unfavourable. So this is the basis of Desha Kalapatra, time, place and circumstance. Sometimes we may be a bit confused as to what we should do at different times and different circumstances. Meanwhile, we're trying to fastidiously follow the rules and regulations. And so it can be a bit confusing, but the main thing is the principle and the detail shouldn't be confused. If the principle is to remember Krishna and do something which is favourable for spreading Krishna consciousness, then the detail will follow. And the details change, just like back in the 19th century, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, then he was really on the cutting edge. He was making some groundbreaking decisions as to how Gaudiya Vaishnavism wasn't going to be left behind. Now that the whole world was starting to become a global village due to communication and transport, then no longer did people have to make expeditions to go to another continent. It was simply a few days and they were there. And nowadays you can travel all over the world within 24 hours. And the furthest place you can go from the UK is probably New Zealand or Australia, and you can get there within a day. And we have such facilities as Zoom, so many other types of communication where you can immediately connect with people. So Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati was thinking that Gaudiya Vaishnavism, if it didn't move with the times, it was going to be left behind as some kind of unknown village religion, or they would move on to the 20th century and of course now the 21st century. So he employed the principle of Yukta Vairagya, which is the verse here quoted by Srila Prabhupada in the purport, Yuktam Vairagyam Uchite, that apparent material affairs, they can be accepted without attachment and everything can be dovetailed for the service of the Lord. So Vishayan, just like someone is known as a Vishayi, that means they're known as a sense enjoyer. But if we're doing everything for the purpose of service to the Lord, then the senses automatically get some enjoyment. We don't have to endeavour separately, we don't have to keep God out of the equation. So therefore, we have to study the lives of previous acharyas, and we can see how to engage in this Yukta Vairagya. And also we shouldn't abuse such a thing. In the name of Yukta Vairagya, we may just enjoy our senses and forget Krishna, then that's not actually Yukta Vairagya, that's just Vishayi, that's just a sense enjoyer. So just naturally the senses are looking for some satisfaction, just like we were saying the other day. If there's no sense enjoyment, then the mind finds it too austere. And then if it's too much, then we may become lazy or we may become too attached. So regulation is the key. And Krishna explains this by detachment and suitable practice. So the suitable practice is regulation. And so we regulate our sense enjoyment and we dovetail in Krishna's service. And we regulate our sadhana. And gradually, in due course of time, then the bodily necessities diminish. And the taste for Krishna consciousness emerges more and more. And in due course of time, we'll look back and we'll realize that we left so many things behind that we never thought we could. Because Krishna, by his presence in the form of the holy name, prasadam, association of devotees, the deities, the service, etc., all these things will occupy our mind and give us a higher taste. So Krishna is known as Rama, the reservoir of all pleasure. So when we go to the reservoir of pleasure, then we don't have to go to all the little puddles of pleasure in the material world. Let's explained in Bhagavad Gita, just as a great reservoir of water can fulfill all the needs of a small pond and beyond it. So whatever pleasure of experiencing the material world is ultimately coming from Krishna anyway. So therefore, and he's the supplier of everything, he's the benefactor of everyone, so there's no need to approach anyone else, we don't have to approach any demigod. And as the yajna for the Kali Yuga is Harinam Sankirtan Yoga, the chanting of the holy name, particularly the congregational chanting, then we don't have to engage in any other type of sacrifice. Sometimes we do different sacrifices, and sometimes it's for particular purposes, but actually Srila Prabhupada explains that none of these sacrifices are complete without the chanting of the holy name and without distribution of prasad. And in fact, if all we do is chant the holy name and distribute prasadam, then that's sufficient. So there's that example given that when Srila Prabhupada opened the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, then he instructed his senior disciples to get some local pujaris to do some elaborate Murti Samastapana, which means the installation of the deities, etc. But confidentially to his disciples, he told them that actually there's no need for all this. All we have to do is chant the holy name. That's sufficient. Because it is a Sankirtan Yoga, it is a Yoga Dharma. So by chanting the holy name, we're performing the Yoga Dharma, and there's no need to do anything else. So we could say, well, why do we do anything else then? Because these other things are also devotional service, but the holy name must always be there. So this is a verse is quite interesting because it's just like Hiranyakashipu was thinking that he could avoid the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or that he could defy the orders of the Supreme Lord, which would mean also that he would defy material nature. But actually, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, Mama Maya Duranyaya, that's Bhagavad Gita 7:14, the rest of that verse is Daiti, Hesh Gunamayi, Mama Maya Duranyaya, Mam Eva Maya Prapajante, Maya Metam Tarantite. This divine energy of mind, known as Maya, consisting of three modes of material nature, is very difficult to overcome. But one who is surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So the only means of surrendering, crossing beyond material nature is to surrender to Krishna, because she's Krishna's servant and she's working under his direction. You can't skip around Maya. That would be Maya in itself. Just like you cannot conquer the mind by listening to the mind, we have to conquer the mind by something higher. Therefore, mantra is there, and other methods of devotional service. So Hiranyakashipu, he was thinking that somehow or another he could circumvent the laws of nature and circumvent Krishna in the form of time so that he wouldn't die. And so he thought of every possible way where he could avoid death. Okay, I won't be killed at any particular time, so neither day nor night. So he thought he'd covered that base. Can't be killed in the land or the sky, by a weapon, by a man or a beast. And any other ones? Do you remember any others?
Is it by any weapon?
By any weapon, yeah. Indoors or outdoors.
Yeah.
So he tried to cover every possible thing. So he thought, great, now there's no way that anyone can kill me because they can't kill me indoors, outdoors, day, night, by any weapon, by a man, by a beast. So he had covered it. He thought, great, now that's it, I'm immortal. And then he just wanted to rule over everybody, and he was such a powerful demon because of his austerities. Here it mentions here that no one can avoid the order of the Lord by the strength of their austerities. So he thought he could, but actually, even though he was very intelligent. He wasn't a fool. We think he was an idiot because he didn't surrender to Krishna. He could have avoided all that trouble, etc. But that's only because we know the end of the story. It's just like if you know the answers to a crossword puzzle, then it's easy. But if you don't know them, then it's puzzling. So just imagine you were in the material world at the time, even as a demigod. The demigods, Hiranyakashipu just had to raise an eyebrow, and the demigods were trembling in fear. It's described like that. And these are the controllers of the material elements, so that indicates how powerful he was. But yet, even though he was so intelligent and so powerful, and his austerities had practically brought the material universe to its knees, still he was under the influence of Maya, because he was thinking that he was this body, or he was thinking that he'd be able to maintain his life heirs within the body, and that he wouldn't have to die. But somehow or another, Lord Nrsingadev kept all of Lord Brahma's promises intact, and yet still annihilated the demon. So this just shows the supreme intelligence of Krishna, that we cannot circumvent him by the power of our intelligence or austerities, mystic yoga, etc., because all these benedictions are ultimately coming from Krishna. Whatever benedictions Lord Brahma gives, or any of the demigods give, actually are given by Krishna, and Krishna is not bound by these. There's another interesting story you may have heard. It's one demon, he got a benediction from Lord Shiva that whoever's head he would touch, it would explode into 1,000 pieces. Because this demon was performing such austerities, he was even offering his own flesh into the fire, and he was ready to cut his own head off and put it into the fire. I don't know how he managed to do that, physically speaking. It seems like once you cut your head off, you've not got much ability to offer anything. Perhaps he had it rigged up in such a way that it would just fall in. But anyway, when it came to that point, then Shiva said, okay, I'll come and give you a benediction. What is it you want? I want a benediction that whoever's head I touch, it will break into 1,000 pieces. He says, okay, I'll give you that benediction then. So although Lord Shiva is a great devotee of the Lord, and he's simultaneously Vishnu and not Vishnu, that's described in the Brahma Samhita, that yogurt is simultaneously milk and not milk. So Shiva is considered, because Vishnu cannot touch the mode of ignorance, then he's actually a manifestation of Vishnu, who is controller of the mode of ignorance. So he gave him this benediction, even though he was thinking, what a foolish demon, he wants such a benediction, what good is such a benediction going to do him? But still, he fulfills these benedictions as a matter of a course of business. If someone does an austerity, then they get the reward. But he's not attached to them. He's not thinking, great, I'm such a benefactor. He's actually more pleased when one becomes a devotee. So the first person that he wanted to touch the head of was Lord Shiva. He wanted to try out his new benediction. Just like Prabhupada says that these weapons that the materialists make, they actually want to use them. They're itching to use them. They don't want to make it just for the sake of keeping it in a cupboard somewhere, keeping it in storage. They actually want to use them. This is the typical nature of the demon. They want to show off their prowess. They're looking for an excuse to do that. And the only thing that sometimes stops them is the threat of total annihilation of everybody. And so this demon, he ran towards Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva, he ran away, and the demon gave chase all over the universe, and finally Lord Shiva approached Vishnu, and Vishnu said to the demon, oh, you got this benediction from Lord Shiva? He said, he talked him out of it. He says, oh, you don't think he can give such benedictions? Look at the people he associates with. And he started making out as if he was decrying Lord Shiva and putting him down and making him seem like he was just a madman. He says, just touch your own head, you'll see he's got no power to give such a benediction. So the demon was convinced to touch his own head, and of course his own head exploded. So in this way, Lord Vishnu's supreme intelligence saved the day again. And it's amazing to see the Supreme Personality of the Godhead has actually got such a sense of humour. This is a manifestation of his humour. And telling you, well, you don't think Shiva can give such a benediction, just test it and you'll see. And then, so there was a bit of a quandary here where Maharaj Priyavrata, Prince Priyavrata at the time, was instructed by Narada Muni not to enter household life, and at the same time he was instructed then by Lord Brahma to enter into household life. So he was thinking that because they were both Vedic authorities, then he shouldn't neglect either of them, but he should use his intelligence to follow the advice of both. And Srila Prabhupada says that the solution for this is yukta vairagya uchiti. Everything can be used in the service of the Lord, and that is real intelligence, that is real renunciation. So Prabhupada makes this point that the Mayavadis say Brahma Satyam Jagan Mitya. So Brahma means spirit, Satya means truth, Jagan, universe, Mitya means false. So they say that the material world is false and only the absolute truth is real. But that's only because they don't recognize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or they don't recognize any personality of Godhead. They just think of the homogeneous oneness of the Brahman and the absolute truth. So therefore they have this philosophy called naiti, which means not this, not that. So by a process of elimination, then all they can really come to conclude about the absolute truth is that it is an energy, because they're not going to come to some conclusion that okay, the material world is false and not this, not that means that God is a little blue cowherd boy that plays a flute. They've never come to that conclusion by their own endeavours. So only that kind of knowledge is revealed, and is revealed from the bona fide parampara, the representatives of Krishna. And they will reveal the form of Krishna through the descriptions of the Lord, through the pastimes of the Lord, and they will reveal the holy Dham of the Lord and all the living entities. And Prabhupada says that the Mayavadis, through this 90-90 process, then some of them actually ultimately get some Brahman mukti, liberation. But he likens it to an astronaut who goes into outer space for some time, but because they have no resting place, they have to return. So he says that similarly, the soul is active by nature, and because it has no actual resting place in the Brahman, then it has to return to the material world, and therefore they fall down into philanthropy and altruism, where they open hospitals, they do so many good things. So because they want to be active, the nature of the soul is to be active. So they, after much endeavour to achieve Brahman, Prabhupada calls it spiritual suicide, that they're giving up their minute independence, or they're giving up, not so much giving up minute independence, but more they're giving up the opportunity to engage in ecstatic loving reciprocation with the Supreme Lord. And generally it's because they're suffering so much. When one comes to the point that the material world, including the sensory realm, is simply suffering, it's either suffering or it's going to be the cause of future suffering, then people become, as Prabhupada says, disgusted with the material world, as in they want to renounce it. So the lesser renunciation is to actually give it up and have nothing to do with it, go and live in the forest. And then Prabhupada says, but who does the forest belong to? The forest also belongs to Krishna, so what are they renouncing? So the real renunciation is to understand that yes, nothing belongs to me. Who does it belong to? It belongs to Krishna. There's a kind of hippie philosophy it's like half the hen philosophy, where they consider that nothing belongs to anybody. Now that's true, in the sense that it doesn't belong to any human being, but they're not taking into account what the Vedic literature says, such as Isavasya Sarvam, Yatkin Jagat Jagat, Tina Tyaptina Bunjita Magridaha Kashasvidanam. Everything animate or inanimate which is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord, and one should accept it. Only those things which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong. So this Prabhupada explains about in the purport to that verse 1 of the Upanishad that this Isavasya principle is the cure for all material problems, because the foundation of material existence is to ignore the Isavasya or the Supreme Controller. But when we recognize that there's a Supreme Controller and a Supreme Proprietor, then we can, in that consciousness, we can act and we can offer everything as a means of sacrifice for the pleasure of the Lord. And in this way, we don't become entangled in the material world. And not only that, but this such engagement, it frees us from entanglement of past reactions too. So they're understanding that the Brahma Satyam Jagat Mitya, that the material world is false, the absolute truth is real. Their understanding is false because they're still under the control of Maya. Srila Prabhupada explains that the Mayavadis, they think that Krishna's form is also a product of the material world, therefore they're called Mayavadis. They think that Krishna's form is a manifestation of Maya in some way. Even some Mayavadis will worship Krishna, but and then they get to a certain point and then they give up the worship of deities and they try to merge into the Brahman. Prabhupada said that the personalism is the last snare of Maya, where the living entity, after giving up everything in the material world, then finally thinks that they are God, thinks that they have become God, become one with God. And Prabhupada said that this one with God, you can become one in purpose, but we cannot become one. The infinitesimal cannot be the infinite. If that was the case, then we could at any time just snap out of it and say, okay, I'm just leaving this material world, but we don't have that ability. We're under the stringent laws of material nature. Prabhupada says here that which is created by the Supreme God of Personality of Godhead cannot be false, but using it for enjoyment is everything is meant to be enjoyed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we utilize everything for the pleasure of the Lord, then it's not that we have to go without, just as the hands are feeding the stomach, and then the stomach distributes the energy to the rest of the body. Then similarly, we feed the source, or we serve the source, and everything becomes auspicious. So Prabhupada said at the end of the pulpit, regardless of one's circumstances, favourable or unfavourable, one should use everything to serve the Supreme Lord. That is the perfect way to use one's intelligence. So we maybe consider something favourable or unfavourable. Like sometimes we think, well, if we're living outside the temple, we think, oh, I wish I was living in the temple, that would be much more favourable, but my circumstances don't allow it. So we don't consider our circumstances favourable or unfavourable, we just do the best we can to utilise everything within our sphere of operation to remember Krishna. And if we can get others to remember Krishna as well, with everything which is at our disposal, then that's also a benefit for them and for us. Or So whether we're living in the temple or living outside the temple, we have to make the situation favourable by utilising everything in Krishna's service, seeing the connection there, how is it connected to Krishna's service. And if somehow or other we're in a situation which we cannot see how it can be linked to Krishna's service, then either we can ask another devotee, or if it's not connected to Krishna's service, if we're able to give that up. Or what it does, it creates a hankering. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So if we're in a situation where it's not favourable for Krishna's service, that somehow or other we feel stuck, then we hanker for Krishna's service, then that hankering is also devotion service. That's called the pralampa, that we're longing to be in Krishna's service. Just like Sanatana Goswami, he was imprisoned by the local Muslim magistrate back in the 15th century. He was imprisoned because he didn't want to work for the state, so he kept on going to hear Bhagavatam and discuss Bhagavatam. And then he was imprisoned, and when he was imprisoned, he was feeling so much separation that finally he managed to escape, and then he became a devotee. He escaped his captor. So if we're in a situation in which we think, well, I wish I could do better service or more service, then just keep on having that desire, keep filling that desire, and whatever we are able to do for Krishna, keep doing that, and in due course of time, definitely the opportunity will be there to increase our devotional service. When we have that desire, then keep that desire there, don't give up on it. Like we might be thinking, oh, I wish I was initiated so I could go on the altar, worship the deities, or I wish this or I wish that. Now that's good if we have some wish to increase our devotional service, then just maintain that wish. Just like years ago I used to do travelling Sankirtan in the motorhome, and I was thinking for some years, oh, it'd be nice to have some deities in the motorhome. And I asked for it once and I was told that it wasn't so practical at that time. And then it was many years later, I just accepted, okay, that's fine, we'll just have a little Panchatattva picture, Prabhupada pictures, etc. And then on his own accord, the Lord came in the form of the deity he was given for that purpose. And then, so when the Lord comes of his own accord, it's actually much better than if we just try to force an issue. If we try to force something, then it may be that we're not ready for it. Just like if we try to act on a high platform of devotion service when we're not ready to act in that platform, if we're too austere, then it's just like an elastic band, you pull it tighter and tighter and tighter, and then finally it will snap, or you have to let it go and it goes the other way. So sometimes too much austerity will lead, when we become tired of that, we go to sense gratification. Prabhupada calls this bogatyag, or renunciation, the pendulum effect, that the pendulum is swinging from one side and then it swings to the other. So similarly, we become tired of sense gratification, so we renounce it and we go toward austerities. And then after some time we become tired of austerities and then we swing back towards sense gratification. So in this way, when we see this is going on all over the world, someone is working all week and in a job they don't like, to get money, to have some kind of lifestyle, artificial lifestyle, because it seems to be the thing which everyone should do. And then at the weekend, to forget about the horrible time they had at work all week, then they get intoxicated so they can forget it. So they try to renounce their austerities of the week at the weekend by getting intoxicated, and then they become so intoxicated to forget their austerities of their work that they become sick practically, even sometimes physically. And then because they become they become fed up with the intoxication, then they have to give that up. So it's not unusual that you hear people on on a Sunday morning going, oh, never again, I'm not going to do that again. And then what happens next Sunday? They're saying never again. But because they have no higher taste, then this boga chag is going on. So this is the process of Krishna consciousness. We have something to offer them that they can really say never again. You can stay high forever and say never again to Maya. Of course, practice makes perfect. We might not become a pure devotee overnight, but certainly if you're in the, as they say, if you're in the shower, you're getting cleaned. So you just stay in the shower, stay in the process, and the process will have its effect. In due course, everything which is inauspicious in our life will vanish. Okay, we'll just stop there. Is there any questions from yourself or anyone online?
I was just thinking, you were talking about how with impersonalism, it's kind of just like, going to the forest and just kind of denying that, it's actually a personal God. But some people can still say that about devotees, like, you're kind of closing yourself off from the outside world, you don't talk to anyone from the outside, and you're, maybe denying, the truth, or I don't know, something different. So how would you explain that to someone that, doesn't know very much about Krishna consciousness?
Yes, so you could say, you could use an analogy, which is if someone is sick, they go to the hospital, you don't criticize them for going to the hospital to get better. And then once they get better, they can come out and they can function. So to begin with, devotees, they may want to really shield themselves from the material world. And because they realise they're vulnerable, just like this COVID-19 thing, then those who are considered more vulnerable, then they want to shield themselves. But actually everybody's vulnerable, so when you realise that we're vulnerable in this material world to the effects of Maya or illusion, then you want to actually immerse yourself in something. So simultaneously you have to engage in Krishna consciousness and you have to protect yourself from the ill effects of our own desires. And so that means that maybe we have to get some strength before we can actually go out into the material world again. And many devotees do live in the material world, and people will never notice them, and that's why they probably only notice the ones which they see in the temple. But there's people who work in banks, who work in construction, who work in IT. There's people who work in all sorts of jobs, but they can continue. And even our main book, Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, he was not meant to go in the temple, neither was Krishna. So we can say the same thing to them. It's like, if your life is so good, then why you have to go and take shelter in intoxication? Why you have to go and hide in the pub? If it's so good, why you have to get intoxicated to forget about it? Or why you have to go and watch movies to take your mind off the troubles of life? So the fact is, we're not. The very thing which they're accusing us of is what they're guilty of, and the very thing they're accusing us of is that we are sticking our head in the sand and trying to just forget about the troubles of the material world. But actually, no, we're facing up to birth, death, old age, and disease. We're realizing that death is going to come, so we're planning to deal with that, whereas they're not. They're the ones that's sticking their head in the sand. Everything they do is simply a distraction, so they don't forget about death. They can't talk about it. And because they have no knowledge, even sometimes they have these events, what's it called now? They meet in cafes and they talk about death. But they don't actually come to some conclusion about what to do at the time of death, what happens after death, how to approach it, how to prepare for it. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
I guess another part of that is that traditionally monastic communities would do that. They would basically hide from the material world, and sometimes physically, because they would be given some kind of pardon, even if they were like a wanted criminal if they joined a monastery. It's like Lismahago itself is considered a sanctuary, back in the 12th century, King David, I think it was, he made the Lismahigo sanctuary, which meant if someone was a criminal or wanted by the law, then they could actually go and seek sanctuary there and stay in the abbey, and they would actually not be pursued for punishment. So sometimes people would do that. Traditionally, monasteries would be like that, but actually, Kali was like a pandemic or epidemic. So we may have discovered that yes, I'm materially diseased, so we're going to the temple to get cured of the disease, and we come back out to also give everyone else the opportunity to realize that they have a disease and to give them the cure. So we don't stay in, we go out. We go out to do many programs. We go out to distribute prasadam, to distribute books, to chant on the streets. So these are the activities which prove that we're not hiding away. But when you approach them with a book to say, actually this is the truth, then the opportunity is for them. Do they want to hide away, or do they want to face up to the truth? Okay. Anything else from anyone?
Thanks. I was also thinking about you were explaining how Maya is Krishna's servant, and that might be difficult for people to understand, because it just seems like she's just putting obstacles there and distracting us from the goal. So how to explain how she's actually serving Krishna, and she's a devotee.
Yeah, she's actually doing a very good job of the service. The purpose of the service is just like Durga is a name for Maya, and the material world is also known as Durga Dam, or the prison house of the material world. So the analogy is such that when you build a city, then you build a prison. Not that you're thinking, okay, we have to put people into the prison because we have it, but you know that some people are going to break the law. So therefore the prison has to be there for those who do it, to protect the others, the innocent citizens, from dangerous people, so that they can get reformed. That's the idea. So the material world is considered to be, or it is, Prabhupada said, it's an opportunity for the rebellious souls to enjoy separately from Krishna. And when they try to do so, they become frustrated and then they turn back to Krishna. So whether that happens, like Prabhupada says, you can become a pure devotee in a moment, or it can take many lifetimes. So just like the prison, the governor of the prison, and he is actually doing a service for the whole city or the whole country by keeping the dangerous citizens out of harm's way, so they can't do any harm to anybody. So they don't interfere with the peace in society. Just like they have that charge disturbing the peace. If someone disturbs the peace, then they get some fine, or they may get some time in prison. If someone does something more heinous, then they get a more stiffer sentence. And even if in jail, while they're in jail, if they commit some abominable activity, then they might get put into solitary confinement or into a straitjacket or something like that. So the more we misuse our freedom, then the more we lose our freedom. So in our original state, in Krishna consciousness, we are completely free. Then we misuse it, and then we get the opportunity to come and enjoy separately from Krishna. And then we forget Krishna, and we forget that the material nature is the law of action and reaction exists, because we want to just enjoy and we don't want to consider any consequences. And you can find that out if you try to preach to people, you try to sell a book and you try to make them aware of the consequences of what they're doing. They don't want to hear it, they just want to enjoy. Someone's going into a McDonald's and say, oh, don't go in there, you're going to get bad karma for that. Oh, shut up, what are you talking about? Yeah, I'm just going to enjoy my burger. But they might think they're enjoying it, but the animal's not enjoying the burger. The animals in the slaughterhouse is going through so much pain, and that's what they're going to have to go through. They're going to have to go through that and be punished for doing that, misusing their human form of life into the bargain. So it's funny because on one hand, people they think, oh, why innocent people have to suffer? You know, can't be any God. And then on the other hand, they say, oh, this person is such a demon. Why are they getting away with it? So it's the same thing, different side of the same coin. On one side, we see that someone appears to be doing something and getting away with it, and on the other side, we're seeing someone seems to be getting punished for nothing. But because they're thinking that there's only one life, and this life is all in all, they're not thinking that there's karmic reaction, and that these karmic reactions come in the next life. But once they realize that they can accept the law of karma and reincarnation, then that answers everything. So Maya's running the show, and everyone is getting according to their deserves. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Alright, so we've got to stop there. Let's go and the key. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Guru Prema. Lord of the